Okay.
Actually, if I want to, since no one else is, a quick comment. I greatly appreciate the team colors commentary on promissory notes and on the work. It's interesting because John and Nancy hadn't had a chance to read it, and we're driving down yesterday, and I had read it. And it was dark in the car, so I didn't drag it out to read it to them. But we were talking in particular this question of the organizations like Acorn, and the whole question of the work that many of us do that is inside and how that works. So we were grappling with that, in part because we work with these kinds of organizations. We work with nonprofits. This is our employers. And so we're grappling. I know, you're a social worker. And so we know this kind of story quite well, and we know, I think, some of its complexities. And so I was glad you brought up a critique of it, because I think that's really important. I think of that often in my own work. I fight against standardized tests for a nonprofit that lives off foundation money mostly, so you can see the connections. But the other thing I wanted to raise is, I don't mean it as a rebuttal at all, because I think it's correct, but I would hope we might spend some time thinking about this, which is the inside-outside question, which is that, at least because I helped write that section, I think quite a bit, I know quite a bit. And the intent, and it may have been conveyed badly, was not so much the organizations, i.e. an Acorn, but the fact that we, for example, are engaged in wage struggles all the time. And by its almost definition, a wage struggle is for a slightly larger share of the wealth within capital. The political question to us has been, I believe, in large part, how the struggle for wage in particular, but wealth more generally, can explode the existing system. Not as a transitional demand or something, but as a fact of power. And that I think part of the analyses that we drew from wages for housework, from zero work, from other folks, was how that happened, in fact, in the 1960s and 70s. And whether that particular aspects, particularly by the formal aspect of the wage, where that works, I don't know. I think we have a lot of work to do in that. But it is, the question to me still, the inside outside. Within the context of the commons, it isn't a part of demand for wealth. It's just in a significant, potentially different form. It is to get away from the wage form and to demand how we share the wealth, produce the wealth, make the decisions, and so on and so forth, in some totally different non-capitalist, post-capitalist, anti-capitalist, whatever, perspective. And so what we're trying to get the inside-outside is precisely that they are not necessarily dichotomies. But in fact, that there's many, many very complex relationships and we lived in it. So the intent was, again, maybe badly expressed, was to try to use that as an analytic tool or frame in order to grapple with the questions that we have many of these complex movements, and we're trapped in capitalism, and we're looking beyond capitalism in our personal lives, in what we see in class doing, in all kinds of different ways. I mean, John mentioned the Mayas in Guatemala, who say they are outside of capitalism and want to stay there. Right? And others who don't claim that. It's not where I live, but I'd like to get out. So these are kind of, I would hope, some of the discussions about as tools to use in thinking about the struggle. And I appreciate that you critique those tools. I think it's essential that we critique those tools while we also try to use them. Thank you.
Yeah, you have one last question or comment that you wanted to sneak in?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to pick up on that too, and kind of go back to what Craig was talking about, because it seems to me it's one of, I think what you raised is actually one of the things that's a sticking point for me with a lot of the Midnight Notes analysis, while I love and appreciate it and have learned a lot from it. One thing that kind of keeps me from kind of jumping on board completely, though I don't think you're asking that of anyone. But anyway, as a sticking point, is kind of this idea that you brought up in talking about SEIU or Andy Stern or some of these other organizations as the way that they've been channeling and directing struggles of the working class. And I do some historical work, and I've just seen that as such a theme in a lot of left analysis, especially like going back to anarcho-syndicalist analysis, that there's always the misleaders in the labor union. The leadership is always the one that's fucking up the real kind of authentic good struggles of the working class, and that that's kind of our biggest challenge, or the thing that needs to be really looked at and changed and challenged the most. And I just wonder if that, I think what that says is it goes back to another concept that comes out of other kind of traditions of radical thought in the last 30 years, and that's just the essentialist idea. The idea that the class, that working people, are always naturally fighting and rebelling. And I think that came up in what Francesca was saying too. You said people don't need to be taught to fight, and I think that's the part that has never exactly clicked for me. I think that it is that people are naturally resentful, and they do naturally resist. But I think that we can't assume that there's always this pure force that's just being misled or mischanneled. And unfortunately, I see that come up in a lot of Midnight Notes writing. So I know that's a big can of worms to open, but something else to kind of think about and put on the table.
I feel like it's kind of another semantic distinction for me, like whether or not you have to teach people to revolt or whether they'll do it on their own. Because at any point, if you have more than one person doing it, like they've probably not even if they haven't talked about it that they're doing, they've talked about being resentful or whatever. So they've in a sense taught each other, right? So it's like, where's the line between not taught and taught? I don't think it matters. I think what matters is if you take a position that's hardline one way or the other, what it makes you advocate. So if you take a hardline position that you need to teach people, then it's going to make you do certain political things. If you have to take a hardline position that you don't need to do anything, it makes you. So I just want to say that because I don't think it's about I don't think there is a distinction actually between teaching and spontaneity. It's like, yeah.
I mean, Andy's always great for throwing incredible questions at people. So instead of but I mean, I guess I'd say like, if it's a sticking point, I mean, because it was for me too, and I think it is for a lot of people. I mean, Craig's pointing to Glutamine, which I think is a great place to start. But also then take if you want to call it a concept, take the concept of the class deal and really understand the ways hierarchies are working throughout all the categories and notes, and bend it until it doesn't work. And at least for me, that's what I've tried, and I think it does. What I think a lot of that does for me is explain where is the inertia, and I think the inertia is not a question of consciousness, as Greg was just saying. You know, this inertia has a lot to do with the compositional nature of these class hierarchies and these class deals that we are made to accept, knowing that it enervates people below us, or you know. And so, I mean, these are lessons I think that come out of our anti-racist experiences and feminist experiences too. But I think it's just another way of bracketing these things, and reading through the lens of class deals and things like that. Kind of, at least for me, it really illuminates and opens up more this question.
I mean, I agree also, but I think that class deals are formed on the basis of how people are understanding the relationships within the wage and how race comes into that, how gender and that thing happens, right? So I guess one thing that's just kind of really been making me think about this is that there's a huge amount of resentment to the crisis right now and a lot of anger, but that a lot of that has been working towards defeating universal health care, or some sort of improved health care. And there's a reason for that, which is because there are other interpretations of what's going on in the crisis that have helped people understand it in a way that they are doing, just like you said, Craig. They're channeling their anger and their resistance and their, the sense of being pissed off at how much taxes are and things like that into struggles that do not forward working class interests. I don't think anyone would agree with that. And so that potential lies there as much as the potential for it to overturn and break capitalism. And I think if we don't understand that, then it's hard to understand why the fuck that's happening and what kinds of ways of talking about this crisis right now and making sense of it are really sticking with people and making them go and do these big teabag rallies and stuff like that, right? That's all.
Thanks all. More soon on the press.